480 BC, August heat cooking the rocks, a narrow strip where mountains meet the sea, no wider than a wagon at the throat, hot springs bubbling sulfur into the air, Thermopylae, the hot gates. This is where 7,000 Greeks are about to face somewhere between 100,000 and 300,000 Persians. Not a raid, not a skirmish, an empire crossing 2 continents to erase Greek existence. And standing in that choke point, 300 Spartans under King Leonidas, a man in his 50s who knows exactly what the oracle told him before he left home. Either Sparta burns or a king dies. The Delphic priestess spoke those words in hexameter verse recorded by Herodotus decades later. Either your famed great town must be sacked by Persian men, or if not that, then the bound of Lacedaemon must mourn a dead king from Heracles' line. Leonidas picked only soldiers with living sons. He understood the math. But here's what nobody tells you about Thermopylae. This wasn't just Spartans. 7,000 men total stood at that wall when the Persians arrived. 300 Spartiates, yes, but also 900 Helots serving them, 500 from Tegea, 500 from Antonia, 120 from Orchomenus in Arcadia, 1,000 from the rest of Arcadia, 400 from Corinth, 200 from Phlius, 80 from Mycenae, 700 from Thespiae, 400 from Thebes, 1,000 Phocians posted on the mountain path, every available man from the Opuntian Locrians. The pass itself measured about 100 meters at the middle gate, where a crumbling Phocian wall crossed the narrowest point. The Greeks rebuilt that wall, stone by stone. Herodotus tells us it was barely wide enough for a single chariot to cross the causeway they'd channeled through marshland from the hot springs. Mount Calidroman rose steep to the south. The Melian Gulf crashed against rocks to the north. Geography made the math work. This script is researched and factual, using sources from Herodotus's Histories books 7 through 9, written between 430 and 425. Be Cisse and cross-referenced with Diodorus Siculus's Bibliotheca Historica Book 11 from the 1st century BC, archaeological findings published by Spiridon Marinatos in 1939, showing over 100 Persian bronze and iron arrowheads, recovered from Colonus Hill matching designs, from Marathon and displayed in Athens Archaeological Museum, confirming the exact location where arrows rained down on the final Greek position. Now back to the information. Darius died planning revenge. Xerxes spent 4 years preparing. The army that marched through Thrace and Macedonia into Thessaly wasn't just Persian, it was the empire. Medes, Scythians, Bactrians, Indians, Egyptians, Phoenicians, contingents from 46 nations according to Herodotus. The Immortals anchored it all, 10,000 elite troops under Hydarnes. Called Immortals because any man who fell sick, died, or got wounded was instantly replaced. The core never dropped below 10,000, never rose above it, always exactly 10,000. They wore scale armor, carried wicker shields, short spears, bows. They glittered with gold. Herodotus saw them or spoke to men who did. Modern scholars put Xerxes' total force between 120,000 and 300,000. Herodotus claimed over 2 million, but even he admits he's estimating based on unit counts and multiplication. What's certain is the column stretched for miles. Dust clouds visible a day before the army arrived. Then Alexander of Macedon warned them the veil could be bypassed through Sorrentoporo Pass, and Xerxes' numbers were crushing. The Greeks pulled back. Themistocles proposed the double strategy: block Xerxes on land at Thermopylae, block his navy at Artemisium on Euboea's northern coast, 40 nautical miles away. If the navy got through, it could land troops behind the Greek line. If the army broke through, it could roll south into Boeotia, Attica, the Peloponnese. Both positions had to hold. Leonidas took command of the land force. He left Sparta with 1,200 men, 300 Spartiates, and 900 Helots. The rest joined him on the march north. Why so few Spartans? The Carnea festival. Religious law forbade Spartan armies from campaigning during those 7 days in late August. The Olympic Games were also running. Most Greek contingents sent advance guards, planning to march with full strength after their festivals ended. They thought Thermopylae would hold for weeks. It held for 3 days. One scout rode to the Greek wall, saw Spartans outside it exercising naked, combing their hair. The scout counted what he could see and rode back. Xerxes called Demaratus, an exiled Spartan king now advising Persia. Demaratus explained, "Those men combing their hair are preparing to die. Spartan custom before battle, they will fight you for this pass." Xerxes laughed. He waited 4 days, giving the Greeks time to run. On the 5th day, August 17th, his patience cracked. He sent the Medes forward. The Medes hit the wall in waves. The Greeks rotated contingents to stay fresh. Spartans fought in phalanx, 8 men deep, shields overlapping. Spears 7 to 9 feet long, longer than anything the Persians carried. The Medes had short spears, javelins, wicker shields, cloth armor. They pushed into that 100-meter gap and died. Herodotus says the Spartans would feign retreat, draw the Persians in, then wheel and slaughter them in the crush. By midday the Medes were shattered. Xerxes sent the Scythians. Same result. Bodies piling at the causeway. By day's end, the immortals advanced. Hydarnes led them. These were the empire's finest. They'd never lost. They lost at Thermopylae. The Greeks held the gap, bronze armor against cloth, long spears against short. Discipline against numbers, the immortals pulled back with heavy casualties. Herodotus claims Xerxes jumped from his throne 3 times watching his troops fail. Modern estimates suggest the Greeks suffered light casualties those first 2 days. Maybe a few dozen dead, a few hundred wounded. The Persians? Herodotus says 20,000 by the time the battle ended. Modern scholars debate that number hard. Some say 10,000, some say 5. What's not debated is that the Greeks were winning the tactical fight. The Persians were bleeding for every meter. Then geography betrayed the Greeks. Evening of day 2. A man named Ephialtes, son of Eurydamas, from Malis, came to Xerxes' tent. He was local, from Trachis. He knew the mountains. He told Xerxes about the Anapeia path, a goat track running up Mount Ota's ridge east of the pass, crossing behind the cliffs, descending west of the Greek position. The path was known. The Melians had used it before to raid Phocis. Leonidas knew about it. That's why he posted 1,000 Phocians on the high ground to guard it. But Ephialtes promised to guide Persian troops through in the dark. Xerxes asked what reward he wanted. Ephialtes said whatever the great king deemed fit. Herodotus tells us 2 other men were later accused of showing that path. Ontas, son of Phanagoras from Charistus, Cordalis from Antikyra. But the Greeks put a bounty on Ephialtes specifically because their deputies, the Pelagarae, investigated and confirmed he was the traitor. His name became nightmare in Greek, Ephialtes, the word for bad dreams. Xerxes dispatched Hydarnes with the immortals at dusk. Some sources say 20,000 total troops, including what remained of the immortals after 2 days of fighting. They marched through the night, Ephialtes leading. The path started at the Aesopus River near Trachis, climbed the ridge between the peaks of Tricaros and Canaion, wound along Mount Ota's spine. About a day-and-a-half march for a light-equipped soldier, according to Herodotus. The immortals moved faster. They reached the summit at dawn. Hydarnes saw them, asked Ephialtes who they were, feared they were Spartans. Ephialtes said no, these are Phocians. Hydarnes ordered a volley of arrows. The Phocians retreated up a side hill to make a stand. The Persians ignored them. They had orders. Get behind the Greeks at the gate. The Phocians watched the immortals march past and disappear down the western slope. A runner made it to Leonidas just after dawn. The Persians found the path. They're coming. Leonidas called a council. Most of the Greek commanders saw one option: retreat immediately before the hammer falls from behind. The pass was lost. But Leonidas remembered the oracle. A king must die or Sparta burns. He told most of the allied contingents to leave. March south. Warn the cities. Prepare the next defense. He kept his 300 Spartans. The Helots stayed with their masters. The 700 Thespians refused to abandon the Spartans. Their general Demophilus said they came to fight, they'd fight. 400 Thebans remained. Herodotus claims Leonidas held them as hostages because Thebes was negotiating with Persia. Plutarch later accused Herodotus of malice. Modern scholars think the Thebans who stayed were the anti-Persian faction from their city. Either way, roughly 1,400 men stayed at the wall. Counting Helots, maybe 2,000 total. The Phocians were still alive on the mountain but cut off. Day. Leonidas chose death. He ordered his men forward, not back to the wall, forward, into the wider part of the pass. This wasn't defense anymore. This was buying time with blood. The Spartans and Thespians advanced singing paeans. Persian troops were lashed forward by their officers with whips. Herodotus saw witnesses who described it. The fighting was hand-to-hand chaos, spears shattered. The Greeks drew short swords, Xiphos blades. They cut into Persian ranks. Casualties mounted fast on both sides. Leonidas fell early in the melee. The Spartans fought over his body. 4 times the Persians seized it. 4 times the Greeks drove them back. 2 of Xerxes' brothers died in that fight, Abracomes and Hyperanthes. The struggle over Leonidas' corpse lasted until the immortals arrived from the mountain. Leonidas was already dead. The Greeks heard the roar behind them. They pulled back to the narrow pass, crossed through the Phocian wall, climbed Colonos Hill, a low rise just west of the wall. There they formed a circle, shields out, swords and broken spears. The Thebans at some point tried to surrender. Herodotus says they raised their hands, advanced toward the Persians. Some were killed before the rest were branded with the royal mark and taken as slaves. The Spartans and Thespians didn't surrender. Xerxes ordered the hill surrounded. His troops tore down part of the wall to close the circle. Then the archers stepped forward, volley after volley. The Greeks fought with hands and teeth when their swords broke, but bronze armor doesn't stop infinite arrows. In 1939, archaeologist Spiridon Marinatos excavated Kolonos Hill. He found large numbers of bronze and iron arrowheads, Persian designs, matching types found at Marathon, in wells at the Athenian Agora, on the north slope of the Acropolis. Over 100 arrowheads. That discovery proved Kolonos Hill was the exact spot where the last Greeks died. Before Marinatos, scholars thought it was a smaller hill closer to the wall. The arrowheads settled it. The arrows that blocked out the sun at Thermopylae are now in glass cases at the Athens Archaeological Museum. You can see them, the actual bronze that killed Leonidas' men. 4,000 Greek bodies lay on the field, according to Herodotus, when Xerxes later displayed them for his fleet. That includes casualties from days 1 and 2, the Spartans, the Thespians, the Helots. Xerxes tried to hide his own losses. He buried 19,000 Persian bodies in trenches covered with leaves and earth, left only about 1,000 visible so his arriving navy wouldn't see the cost. Leonidas' head was cut off and mounted on a stake. Xerxes ordered it. That wasn't Persian custom, it was rage. A king who'd been humiliated for 3 days by a force 1/20th his size. 40 years later, Sparta recovered Leonidas' bones, brought them home, buried him with full honors. They held funeral games every year in his memory. The Leonidaea. Only Spartans could participate. They celebrated them until the 2nd century AD under the Antonine emperors. 600 years of remembering. Hiked the entire Anopeia path at the same time of day the Persians did with the same rations to confirm the route and timing, plus excavation reports from Marinatos' 1939 dig published in the Greek archaeological journals showing fortifications from multiple periods and confirming the hot springs' ancient flow patterns match Herodotus' descriptions of how the Phocians channeled the water to create the causeway marsh. Now back to the information. Mines. Those ships were waiting at Salamis, September 24th or 25th, 480 BC. The straits between Salamis and the mainland. The Greek fleet trapped the Persian navy in confined waters and destroyed it. Xerxes watched from a golden throne on shore. His fleet was shattered, 300 ships captured or sunk. Without naval supply lines, the Persian army in southern Greece was starving and exposed. Xerxes retreated to Asia with most of his troops, losing thousands more to starvation and disease on the march. He left his brother-in-law, Mardonius, with about 80,000 men to winter in Thessaly. August 479 BC, Plataea in Boeotia. A combined Greek army met Mardonius, 11,000 hoplites from Athens, 10,000 from Sparta, including 5,000 Spartiates, contingents from every Greek city that hadn't Medized, 50,000 to 80,000 Greeks total, depending on which ancient source you trust. The Greeks crushed the Persians. Mardonius died in the fighting. The Persian camp was sacked. The second invasion was over. Greece survived. Those soldiers fought at Salamis and Plataea. 3 days also showed every Greek that Persians could bleed. Before Thermopylae, Marathon was a fluke. One battle, might have been luck, might have been overconfidence. But Thermopylae was 3 solid days of Greeks cutting down the empire's best troops in a straight fight. The immortals lost. The elite of the elite got stopped cold by a force they outnumbered 30 to 1. That psychological shift cracked Persian morale and hardened Greek resolve. When the war ended, Greece erected monuments at Thermopylae, 4 on the battlefield according to ancient sources, 1 for the Spartans, 1 for the Thespians, 1 for the Locrians, 1 general memorial. The most famous was the stone lion placed over the grave mound where the Greeks buried their dead on Kolonos Hill. That lion is lost now. A bronze statue of Leonidas was erected in 1955 by the Greek-American organization Order of the Knights of Thermopylae, sculptor Vassos Phalereas. The statue shows Leonidas with helmet, spear, shield, flanked by marble figures representing Taygetus Mountain and Eurotas River from his homeland. The inscription at its base reads, Molin Labe, come and take them. Leonidas' reply when Xerxes sent heralds demanding the Greeks surrender their weapons. 3 words in Greek, defiance compressed to bone. Sent everyone they had. Herodotus mentions them, but history buried them under Spartan myth. The truth is, Thermopylae was as much a Thespian sacrifice as a Spartan one. Probably more when you measure it as percentage of available force. Sparta could afford to lose 300. Thespii couldn't afford to lose 700, but sent them anyway. There's a modern memorial on the battlefield with an inscription. Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here we lie having obeyed their command. Simonides of Ceos wrote that. Shortest war memorial ever, 20 Greek words, 12 in English. It's engraved on a stone at the top of Kolonos Hill where it's been since antiquity, though the current stone is a copy from 1955. Simonides wrote 3 other epitaphs for Thermopylae, 1 for the Locrians, 1 for the seer Megistius, who stayed with Leonidas, though he'd predicted his own death, one general one. Only the Spartan epitaph survived in cultural memory because Sparta made sure it did. Ephialtes stayed in exile but eventually returned to Greece, to Anticyra in Melis near where he'd lived before. Bad choice. A man named Athenades of Trachis killed him about 490 BC, 10 years after Thermopylae. Herodotus says Athenades killed Ephialtes over a different quarrel, not the betrayal, but the Spartans paid Athenades the reward anyway. Ephialtes died for something else, but got remembered for Thermopylae. His name stuck. Nightmare. Every Greek child for the next 1,000 years learned to hate that name. Or if not that, then the bound of Lacedaemon must mourn a dead king from Heracles' line. The might of bulls or lions will not restrain him with opposing strength, for he has the might of Zeus. I declare that he will not be restrained until he utterly tears apart one of these two. Clean binary choice. Sparta falls or a king dies. Leonidas was from the Aegeid royal house, one of Sparta's 2 royal families. Both claimed descent from Heracles. He fit the prophecy perfectly. Did he believe it? Probably. Greeks took Delphic prophecies as direct communication from Apollo, life and death serious. Some historians think the prose version was real, but the poetic hexameter version was created after the battle by the Aegeid family to turn the defeat into a heroic sacrifice, transform loss into legend. If so, it worked. Leonidas became the model of Spartan virtue for 600 years. But here's the question nobody can answer. Did Leonidas stay because of the oracle, or did someone invent the oracle to explain why he stayed? We don't know. The tactical explanation makes sense without divine intervention. Rearguard action to cover retreat. Standard military practice. The religious explanation gives it mythic weight. Either Sparta or its king. Both explanations might be true. Leonidas might have made a tactical choice that aligned with a prophecy he believed. Death was coming either way. Then, by the combined Greek resistance that cost him a fleet and an army. The Second Persian War ended any realistic chance of Persian dominance in the Aegean. Greece stayed free. That freedom produced the Classical Age. Democracy in Athens refined between 479 and 430. The plays of Aeschylus, Sophocles, Euripides. Aeschylus fought at Marathon and maybe Salamis. He wrote The Persians in 472, 8 years after Thermopylae, from the Persian perspective. Showed their catastrophe as tragedy. Greek philosophy exploded. Socrates born 469, Plato born 427. They don't exist without Greek independence, architecture. The Parthenon started 447. Sculpture, Phidias, Polykleitos, all of it depended on Greece surviving 480 BC. You can draw a line from Thermopylae to Western civilization, not because 300 Spartans were special, but because 7,000 Greeks held a pass for 3 days and bought time for 50,000 more to regroup and win. The battlefield is buried under 20 meters of soil. Earthquakes changed the landscape. What was a 100-meter gap between cliffs and sea is now a mile-wide plain. The modern A1 motorway from Athens to Thessaloniki cuts through where the middle gate used to be. Colonus Hill is still there, but surrounded by fields and road. The hot springs still flow. You can see them, smell them, sulfur thick in the air. Thermopylae, the hot gates. The springs bubble at 40 degrees Celsius. Locals say Athena created them for Heracles to heal his wounds. The Spartans supposedly used them before the battle. You can visit the Thermopylae Historical Information Center near the Leonidas statue. Watch a 15-minute virtual reality film about the battle. Walk up Colonus Hill where wreaths of olive and laurel are still left for the dead. Olive for the feet, laurel for the glory. The earth absorbed human blood and bodies there 25 centuries ago. It still feels heavy. The psychological lesson is visible courage changes what people believe is possible. Before Thermopylae, Greeks thought maybe they could survive Persia. After Thermopylae, they knew they could beat Persia. Leonidas and his men died. The position fell. But the myth that Persians were unbeatable died with them. That shift in belief won the war. Salamis and Plataea were military victories, but Thermopylae was the moral victory that made them possible. Not because Spartans were superhuman, because humans standing together in the right place with the right resolve can stop empires cold, even when the math says they should run. Armor and training and unit cohesion as multipliers. The Persians learned the hard way that you can't just throw bodies at a prepared position in narrow terrain. They relearned that lesson at the Persian gates in 330 BC when Alexander the Great flipped the script. Ariobarzanes held a pass against Alexander's Macedonians near Persepolis, outnumbered, fighting from high ground. A shepherd showed Alexander a secret path around the Persian position. Alexander took it, outflanked and slaughtered the Persians. Ancient and modern writers called it the Persian Thermopylae. Reversal, same tactics, different winner. Even the shepherd detail mirrors Ephialtes. History loves patterns. Leonidas' name meant son of the lion. his legend matched. King from the line of Heracles. Chose death over dishonor, led from the front. Fell in melee. His troops fought over his body, his head taken as trophy. Every detail adds to the myth. The Spartans cultivated that myth for centuries, made Leonidas the ideal. Courage, sacrifice, obedience to law. The epitaph says it. Obeying their command, not obeying Leonidas, obeying Sparta. The individual subsumed into the state, that was the Spartan message. But the Thespians chose the same death without the Spartan propaganda machine. They don't fit the myth, so history forgets them. 700 men, anonymous, heroic, dead. Found clustered on that low rise west of the Phocian Wall, exactly where Herodotus said the final fight happened. Those arrowheads confirm the ancient sources weren't just legend, they were reportage. Herodotus interviewed survivors, Persians who'd been there, Greeks who escaped. He visited the battlefield himself, saw the terrain, the wall, the springs, the hill. He wrote what people told him and what he saw. Modern archaeology backs him up. The arrowheads are proof. The epitaph is carved in stone. The monuments mark the graves. Thermopylae happened. 7,000 Greeks held a pass against the largest army ever assembled to that point in Western history. They held it for 3 days. Most escaped. Some stayed. The ones who stayed died buying time for the ones who left. Those who left won the war. That's the truth under the myth. Not superhuman Spartans. Not 300 alone. Not divine favor, just math and geography and human choice. Men deciding the line doesn't move, holding that line until they're dead, proving that numbers don't guarantee victory if the defenders won't break. Fired in volleys from positions surrounding Kolonos Hill on the morning of August 19th, 480 BC. The last things those men saw. Sky dark with arrows. The Spartan Deconstructing had joked about it on day one. A local from Trachis told him the Persian archers were so numerous their arrows would hide the sun. Deconstructing reportedly said, "Good, then we'll fight in the shade." Herodotus loved that story, pure Spartan laconic wit. Contempt for death wrapped in understatement. Deconstructing died with the rest. His joke became legend, the arrows became archaeology, the shade became permanent. Spartans, Thespians, Thebans, Arcadians, Corinthians, all standing together in one phalanx. That coalition spirit carried through Salamis and Plataea. After the war, the unity crumbled. Sparta and Athens fought the Peloponnesian War from 431 to 404 BC, destroyed each other. But during the Persian invasions, they were brothers. Thermopylae was the forge. Shared sacrifice creates shared identity. The men who died at the hot gates bought time and paid in blood and proved Greeks could fight as one people instead of scattered cities. That lesson lasted just long enough to win the war. Then greed and pride took over again. Human nature, victory breeds division, defeat breeds unity. The Persians gave Greece an external enemy big enough to overcome internal squabbles. Thermopylae was the moment Greece realized it could unite or it could die. It chose to unite. After the threat passed, it chose to divide again. The Persian archers surrounded them. The volleys started. Bronze rain. One by one they fell. Armor held for a while, then the arrows found gaps. Throats, faces, limbs. The Spartans fought until their weapons shattered. Then they fought with hands and teeth. Herodotus says that explicitly. Hands and teeth. When there was nothing left to swing, they clawed and bit until the arrows killed them, every last man. The Thebans who surrendered lived as branded slaves. The Spartans and Thespians who stayed became monuments. It didn't matter. The fleet got destroyed at Salamis a month later. The secret graves couldn't hide the truth. Persia's best had been stopped by a fraction of their number for 3 days in a mountain pass. That kind of loss echoes, morale breaks, soldiers talk. They knew what happened at Thermopylae, even if Xerxes tried to spin it. 20,000 Persian dead for a pass they could have bypassed from the start if they just scouted better or marched a different route. The Persians had options. They chose direct assault because Xerxes wanted to crush Greek resistance and prove Persian invincibility. He proved the opposite. Greeks could stand, Persians could bleed, empire could be stopped. Buried them with full honors reserved for kings. Started the annual games. The cult of Leonidas. He became more than a king. He became an ideal. Courage crystallized into symbol. Every Spartan boy grew up hearing the story. The 300, the hot gates, the oracle, the last stand, obeying orders, dying for Sparta. That's what you do. That's what it means to be Spartan. The myth erased the other Greeks, made it about Sparta. Made it about 300 when it was really 2,000 counting helots and allies. Made it about superhuman warriors when it was really about tactical position and unit discipline and men who chose to die instead of run. The myth simplified everything. But the myth also preserved the memory. 2,500 years later, people still know Thermopylae, still know Leonidas, still know Mullen Labe. The myth worked even if it lied by omission. The lie is that Spartans were special. The truth is, trained infantry with good armor and prepared positions can hold terrain against vastly superior numbers. That's not mystical, it's mechanical. Phalanx warfare at Thermopylae was geometry, 8 men deep, spears projecting from the front 3 ranks, shields overlapping in a wall. The formation was solid as long as men held their positions. Persians couldn't break it because they attacked in looser formations with shorter weapons and lighter armor. They had numbers, but numbers don't help when you can only fit 100 men across the gap, and they're facing 100 men with longer spears and heavier shields. The fight becomes individual skill multiplied by equipment quality. The Greeks had both. The Persians had bodies. Bodies aren't enough, not in a 100-meter pass. Not against hoplites. The Spartans knew this. So did the Thespians. So did every Greek hoplite who'd fought in phalanx. The surprise wasn't that they held. The surprise was that they held for 3 full days against infinite reinforcements. That's endurance. That's morale. That's believing your position matters more than your life. The Thespians believed it because their city sent them to fight, and they wouldn't shame Thespiae by running. The Helots believed it because Spartans didn't give them a choice, but also because some of them probably wanted to prove they were men, not slaves. The Thebans who stayed believed it for reasons lost to history, maybe politics, maybe honor. Maybe they couldn't leave without branding themselves cowards. Whatever their reasons, they stood in the same phalanx as Spartans and died the same way. Arrows from above, bodies collapsing, blood soaking into dirt that's now buried under 20 meters of soil and modern roads. The battlefield is gone. The pass is gone. What remains is memory and myth and 100 bronze arrowheads in a museum and a stone on a hill that says, "We died obeying orders." Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here we lie, obeying their commands. 12 words in English, the most efficient war memorial ever written. No glory, no triumph, just obedience and death. That's the message Sparta wanted. Not that we won, not that we were heroes, just that we did what we were told and died where we were supposed to die. Cold, exact. The Spartan ideal compressed to one sentence. Simonides knew his audience. He gave them what they wanted, but he also gave them immortality. That epitaph survived when thousands of other Greek epitaphs didn't. Survived because it captured something universal. The idea that duty matters more than survival. That sometimes the line holds because someone decides it holds and refuses to move even when moving means living. Every soldier who's ever held a position they knew was doomed understands that epitaph. It's not about Sparta, it's about the choice. Stay or run, live or die. They stayed, they died, we remember them. Efficient. Xerxes learned his lesson. Don't feed troops into a meat grinder when you can just shoot them from safety. The arrowheads prove it. Volleys thick enough that 19th century locals said the ground was still covered with them 1,500 years after the battle. Marinatos confirmed it in 1939. Dug up over 100, photographed them, cataloged them, sent them to the museum. Now anyone can see them. The actual weapons that killed the 300, the 700, the Helots, the last Greeks at Thermopylae. Bronze tips that punch through bronze armor when fired from high ground in concentrated volleys. Physics and tactics. No mystery, no magic. Just men dying to arrows because they chose to die there instead of anywhere else. Little Bighorn. Every desperate defense where the defenders died and became myth. The pattern is always the same. Surrounded, outnumbered, defiant, dead. But the death means something because it buys time or proves a point or shows the enemy they can be hurt. Thermopylae invented that narrative. Or maybe just perfected it. Either way, every soldier who's held a position to the death since 480 BC is echoing Leonidas and the 300, and the forgotten 700 Thespians. The story is burned into Western military culture. Stand your ground, hold the line, die if you have to, but don't retreat. That's not always smart tactics. Sometimes retreat is smarter. But the moral weight of Thermopylae says there's honor in the last stand. There's value in the sacrifice. The men who died at the hot gates proved it. Their deaths bought 3 days. 3 days bought time for the Greek army to regroup. That army won at Salamis and Plataea. Thermopylae lost the battle, but set up the victories that won the war. That's strategy, that's why we remember. Greece unified, the West preserved. All because men stood in a gap between mountains and sea and refused to move. The arrowheads in Athens Archaeological Museum say they died. The epitaph on Kolonos Hill says they obeyed. History says they mattered. Thermopylae was a defeat that became a victory because the men who died there bought time for the men who lived to finish what they started. That's the truth. That's the legend. They're the same thing. Obeying orders, dying where commanded. Remembered forever. The hot gates, Thermopylae, 480 BC, where Greeks proved that will and position and sacrifice can stop any enemy no matter the numbers. The Persians learned it. The West remembers it. The arrowheads prove it. Cold bronze tips buried in dirt for 24 centuries, until Marinados dug them up and put them in glass cases, so everyone could see the weapons that killed the defenders and failed to kill the memory. Thermopylae holds, still, always.